Hi there, this is Dr. Rebecca Gonzalez, and I'm a psychologist at the Texas State University Counseling Center. Thank you so much for joining me to talk a little bit about mindful communication. I'm really excited to just talk a little bit about what is mindfulness, how can we start to incorporate it into the way that we communicate with the people around us, the benefits of engaging with mindful communication, and really how to practice mindful communication. So we'll start with just talking a little bit about what is mindfulness. So really briefly, I think you're going to get a lot of really good content on here about what mindfulness is, but really briefly, mindfulness is awareness that arises through paying attention on purpose in the present moment and non-judgmentally. So that's a quote, the direct quote that's attributed to John Kabat-Zinn. So really what we want to do when we practice mindfulness is engage with present moment awareness. So much of the time we're thinking about the past or we're thinking about the future. We are not in the present moment. So really what mindfulness is a practice that helps us engage with momentary awareness, helping us to disconnect from living our lives on autopilot. A lot of the time we're not really aware of what we're experiencing in the moment, and we can be missing out on a lot of just the sights, the sounds, the smells, and the connections that really bring a sense of joy. So part of what we want to really think about when we are engaging with mindful communication is we want to increase our sense of being present in our lives. And so really mindfulness is a way that helps us be present focused, also engage with a sense of non-judgment of the present moment. So when we are engaging with mindful communication, we really are thinking about how can we be fully present when we're communicating with others? How can we remain open and non-judgmental, and really be intentional when we're speaking with other people? I think the big part of this too is relating with others in a way that helps us be more compassionate towards them and also towards ourselves. So when we think about engaging with mindful communication, we really want to bring a greater level of awareness to really the big components of communication, right? When we're listening and speaking. So really, we want to be able to, again, bring that present focus awareness, non-judgmentalness, and really being intentional and compassionate when we talk to other people, when we listen to other people. So part of what can be beneficial about engaging with mindful communication is it really helps us strengthen our relationships. When we are engaged, when we are listening, when we are being intentional, and non-judgmental in the way that we communicate with others, it can really help just deepen the connections that we have with people in our lives. It helps us to better understand ourselves and what other people are needing. So of course that will always help us feel more connected in our relationships. It also helps us feel less isolated. When we are able to communicate our own needs, really listen to the needs of others, of course it'll help us just feel more connected and less alone when we need that support and when we're giving that support. We also find that it really boosts our sense of mood and resilience and connection. So there are, a lot of benefits to engaging with mindful communication. So let's talk a little bit about how we can start to communicate a little bit more mindfully. Really, the biggest kind of aspect that we can really practice on a day-to-day level is to do something called active listening, where we seek to understand the meaning and intentions behind what other people are saying. So this involves having good eye contact, asking open-ended questions to encourage further responses, really listening to understand, reflecting what you hear, and trying as best as we can to just withhold judgment. So really active listening is, again, just showing that we are actively engaged in listening to somebody when they're talking to us. Again, this would include a lot of good eye contact. It can include nonverbals, really kind of nodding and showing that we're engaged and paying attention. We can also, again, we want to ask open-ended questions to encourage more responses. So when people are talking, asking things like, can you tell me a little bit more about that? What did you think about that? What do you think is the best path moving forward? How do you think you could have responded differently, kind of having a little bit of space away from it? Really, we want to ask again those open-ended questions that really help us communicate that we're understanding, that we want to listen, and that we're engaged as we listen. Another big part of communicating mindfully is to really have a lot of empathy. I think we can always just reflect that we can kind of try to imagine what it must be like for the other person. Again, we'll never know exactly what it's like for them, but expressing things like, I'm so sorry this is happening to you. How are you? That sounds like it must be so overwhelming. These are things that really can help us communicate empathy when we're listening. We can also try to be as non-judgmental when we're speaking to people. So trying not to judge what the speaker is saying before they've finished, trying not to interrupt people when they're talking. And again, we're just wanting to demonstrate that active listening. We can paraphrase what people are saying or what they have said, ask for clarifications when necessary. Really, we're just trying not to finish other people's sentences. We're not to jump in before they're done speaking. Really, we're really wanting to hone into just listening to what they're saying. We can also practice compassion when we're talking with people. We really want to focus again on what the person is feeling, their points of view. We're never disregarding our own, but really in this moment, again, we're listening, we're trying to have compassion for what the other person is experiencing. We want to be open and be curious. I think that's a big part of engaging with, again, this listening to really understand versus to reply to what someone is saying. We also want to be, when it feels appropriate, we can be vulnerable, and share like, oh, that must be really difficult. I have experienced something similar and I know that it's really difficult. We are anything that we can do to really show that we are in the moment and that we want to be engaged in the conversation. We can always practice gratitude. I think that's one of the biggest aspects of communicating mindfully. In our communications, really helping just express gratitude when we're talking to people. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I really learned a lot from you. And really practicing that on a daily basis. Ultimately, some of the biggest roadblocks to mindful communication are comparing our thoughts and experiences to others. So again, really, we just want to make sure that we're listening. We're trying not to compare. We are trying to listen to really understand what someone's experiencing. We want to try to disconnect from the desire to mind read or like try to predict what somebody will say next. We also want to not rehearse, and try to think about what we're saying. Really, we just want to be in the moment. We want to be actively listening, trying to really understand what someone's saying, communicating that empathy and compassion, and trying to disconnect from, kind of jumping in before people are done. I think that is one of the biggest things. We want to actively listen. We want to be in the moment. It's just going to help enhance our sense of connection, and decrease our sense of isolation when we're communicating to people. So hopefully this will give you just a couple of tips in terms of how to start communicating a little bit more mindfully.